Hello and welcome back to another episode of Gamecom. Now this is a very special occasion. Exactly 20 years ago, on the 24th of August 1995, Microsoft released Windows 95. Now the reason why this is a big deal is because Windows 95 is the very first operating system released by Microsoft that essentially gave programmers or gamers the ability to play any game that the PC was capable of running. You see, the thing is that back in the early days of Windows, with Windows version 1, 2, and 3, and subsequent updates to version 3, such as 3.1, 3.11, very sophisticated games, such as Doom or Duke Nukem 3D, those kinds of games, could not run in Windows. And the reason for that is because Windows used to be more of an elaborate program that ran in DOS, as opposed to it being a true operating system. It pretty much needed DOS to function properly. Windows 95, even though you can install MS-DOS onto your computer and then install Windows 95, and have both of these operating systems running together, you could actually install Windows 95 without installing DOS. It was a fully realized operating system that was capable of taking advantage of all of the abilities of the PC. Windows 95 is an extremely important operating system in that regard, meaning that it established Windows as being the go-to platform for playing games. Now, as you can see, we're busy playing a game called Hover. Now, this game was bundled with the CD version of Windows 95. And the reason why Microsoft, got a small team of people to develop this game is because they wanted to show consumers and, technicians and programmers that Windows is capable of doing advanced 3D gaming. So there was really no point in making DOS games anymore. In fact, in a lot of ways, DOS was kind of outdated. Even back in the early 90s, a lot of programmers had to get very creative, and they had to build very elaborate means of getting advanced 3D engines to run in DOS, because DOS was an extremely basic operating system. Windows was a graphic user interface, or GUI, or GUI as some people like to call it, and Windows 95 was the first graphical user interface operating system that allowed for players to play any game they wanted. Now, granted, there may have been some games that could not work in Windows 95, but that was mostly due to compatibility issues, as opposed to Windows 95 not being able to run the game. Eventually people would release updates to their games to get it to run on the Windows 95 platform, such as Quake. Quake is probably the biggest example of this. Quake originally was designed for DOS only, but because of the huge popularity of Windows 95, the majority of the updates for Quake was released for the Windows 95 platform. And so for instance, GL Quake, WinQuake, that's all designed exclusively for Windows 95. Now, granted, there was also a Mac version of Quake, but I'm talking about the PC version of Quake here. So Windows 95 is an incredibly important operating system, not to mention a lot of the things that we kind of take for granted in modern versions of Windows, like Windows 10, like the the taskbar and the start menu, that began in Windows 95. Anyways, as you can see, I switched to full screen mode in Hover, and the reason why I did that is I just wanted to show something really funny about this game. When you go into full screen mode, we were playing this game in windowed mode because it offered a resolution of 640 by 480, but in full screen mode, for some reason, the resolution is 320 by 240. I'm not exactly sure why that's happening, but anyways, it doesn't really matter, because Hover is a game that hasn't aged too well. It was fun at the time, when I was a kid, but it had a lot of features that were kind of redundant and a very repetitive gameplay. So the only reason why I'm showing you this game is probably because I don't think I'll ever be able to show you guys this game again, just simply because it's not that interesting of a game. I consider Windows 95 to be one of the best operating systems of all time. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. Granted, I didn't really grow up with Windows 95 as much as Windows 98, but in a lot of ways, Windows 95 was actually kind of better when compared to Windows 98 because 95 was slightly faster, used slightly less resources, and in some ways it was a little bit more stable depending on the hardware. But at the same time, it could run pretty much all the same programs and games. I mean, like Windows 98 was more of a modification to Windows 95 than it was a true next-gen operating system. No, that honor goes to Windows 2000.